Let's turn our boring PS5 controller into a scuf for under 50 bucks. We're going to be installing the Rise 2.0 back button kit from Extremerate. This will give us 2 programmable buttons on the back of our controller. We'll also install the replaceable thumbstick kit from Extremerate as well. Let's start with what we get inside the box. Opening it up, you'll find the controller backplate, which comes with the kit. In this case, we've got the black textured finish. Then we got our buttons and the housing for the control panel. Our tools, pry tool, screwdriver, and screws. We got some logic board stuff here. We'll get into that in a minute. And then some ribbon cables and a warranty card. Next up is our interchangeable stick kit. 3 concave sticks, 3 convex sticks. 2 of the sticks are taller for your FPS games, and it comes with 2 bases. The sticks are pretty decent quality and are press fit, so they will be tight when they're on, but you'll be able to take them off when you need to. Now let's grab our tools, open it up, and grab our pry tool. We're going to start by prying off the L1 and R1 buttons. You stick your pry tool beside it, pop it off, it comes out pretty easily. Don't be too afraid. Once those are done, we'll move to the front of the controller and start taking away the front faceplate. There are little seams near the ends of the controller where you can stick the pry tool in. Get it in there, pry it up, and it pops out. Once you've got the ends removed, you can work your pry tool along the edge of the front of the controller, and this should help unlodge all the clips. As you unlodge clips, keep in mind you're going to want to pry up on those pieces as well so that they stay dislodged. Once that's removed, we can go ahead and take out the 4 Phillips screws with our screwdriver that was provided, and they are located under the L1 and R1 buttons, as well as under the front where we first initially put our pry tool. Once all 4 screws are removed, we can go ahead and use our pry tool to unclip the 2 front-facing clips that are near the mic input on the controller. After those clips are removed, you'll want to work your pry tool near the edges of the controller, and when you get towards the L1 and R1 area, you're going to want to twist the tool in order to pry it open. Once that's done and all the clips are undone, you can take off the back plate. Next step is to take the battery and remove it. There is a small connector, and you'll see it right here. You'll want to shimmy the connector just so you don't break the wires, and pull gently and it should slide right out. Next, we'll want to remove the screw holding the battery plate. To do this, we just use our same screwdriver to unscrew the single screw holding it, and then we can slowly remove it, making sure you don't break the cable that's holding the microphone. Once that's done, we'll remove the blue ribbon cable at the top of the controller using some tweezers. Next, unplug the ribbon cable that is small near the bottom of the controller on the L1 and L2 side. Once that's done, we'll remove the trigger ribbon cables that are on the L1 and L2 side. We want to repeat the same process for the R2 and R1 side and remove the ribbon cable for those triggers as well. I find this process a lot easier if you have a pair of tweezers, but it's not completely necessary. Once that's done, you'll want to flip the controller over and use your thumbs to push the thumbsticks outwards to separate the motherboard from the controller. Now, if you didn't get the thumbstick kit, you don't have to watch this part, you can skip ahead. But because we got the kit, we're going to go ahead and replace these thumbsticks. You can go ahead and pull these thumbsticks off and then grab your stick kit. Once you have your stick kit, get the 2 bases that came with it and line up the notch that's on the bottom. It's in a specific shape, so you'll be able to identify that when you're looking at it. It only goes in one way. Press them in, make sure they're secure, test them out, and you're good. Now we can grab our link ribbon cable, and it looks like this. It's got 3 slots for other cables to go into it. It's also got an adhesive pad on one side, and we'll be using that later. With the adhesive side facing upwards, you're going to want to make sure that the other portion of the ribbon cable is on the outside of the controller, and then on the inside of the controller, you're going to want to line up the pins, use the 2 posts, those plastic posts, to secure the new cable, and then press it down, make sure that it's secure on those posts, and then you can go ahead and refit the motherboard back into the controller. You want to make sure that those ribbon cables are where they need to be. So the one that you unplugged earlier near the microphone, make sure that's out from underneath the motherboard and is accessible for when you need to plug it back in. Once it's back in, you can go ahead and plug in that little tiny ribbon cable that's near the microphone on the L1, L2 side. Next, we're going to prep our ribbon cable for the L1 and L2 buttons. You're going to want to cut off the pieces that are not related to your controller model. So in this case, I have the BDM20 and I cut off the BDM10 pieces so they're not in the way. Once the pieces are cut off, you want to fold along those dotted edges and crease the ribbon cable so that you can use it and plug it in when you need to. Once you have it folded, you can go ahead and insert it into the L1, L2 slot, with the gold pins facing towards the center of the controller. Once that piece is in, you can go ahead and fold over the top piece and plug that into the slot that was used for the old ribbon cable. The gold pins face outwards this time. Here's a closer look of what it looks like once it's all plugged in. Next, we'll prep our R1 and R2 ribbon cable. Go ahead and cut off the pieces that you're not going to need. Again, in this instance, I've got the BDM20, so I cut off the BDM10 pieces. Once it's prepped, we'll go ahead and plug it in, making sure that our pins are facing the center of the controller again. We'll perform the same maneuver, folding over the top connector to connect it to the motherboard. Make sure all your connections are snug and are not loose, as you don't want to have any issues once you put the controller back together. Here's a closer look of the R1 and R2 ribbon cable. Once those cables are dealt with, we'll go ahead and reconnect our blue ribbon cable at the top of the controller, again ensuring that it's snug and in place. Next, we can go ahead and put the battery cover back on, leaving the rest of the ribbon cable from the R1, R2 side out so that we can plug it in when we need to. Also, make sure you fit in that microphone where it needs to go. Then you can screw the plate back in. Here I'm resetting the microphone in place. There's a little slot for the ribbon cable to fit into, and that makes sure it's secure. Next, we'll put in the battery. First, plug it in. It only goes in one way, so don't be too worried. Once it's plugged in, fit it back onto the tray and tuck the wires under the shelf. Once the battery's back in, we can go ahead and prep our back plate. Using the plate that came with it, we're going to screw in the housing for the buttons. This uses 4 screws in total, and they are the bigger screw out of the 2 types of screws that you have. Once it's secure and in place, we're going to throw it to the side and stick on our adhesive pad. Remove the protective layer and you can stick it onto the battery. Press down to make sure that it's stuck. And now we're going to open the ports for the small ribbon cables on that piece. There's a black tab on the edge of the connector that moves up and downwards. To open the connection, you open it upwards, and then you can slide your ribbon cable into the connector. And then once it's in securely, you can close the hatch and lock it down in place. You're going to want to do this for both the L1, L2 ribbon cable as well as the R1, R2 cable. Each cable is only long enough to go into one of the ports, so you can't mess this up. Once those small ribbon cables are all in place, we can grab our back housing and feed the remaining ribbon cable through the housing. We can leave this as we're going to work on the control board for the button mapper. Grab the control board, open the flap, insert that ribbon cable into the connector with the pins facing downwards, lock the flap in, and you're connected. We can leave that for now as we're going to insert our K1 and K2 buttons, which are our paddles. You're going to want to feed the metal rods that came with the kit through the slot on the K1 and K2 buttons, and then press them into place on either side. Once those are in place, we can test fit the motherboard, ensuring that the 2 pins that are underneath come through the motherboard, and test our buttons to make sure it's all clicky. If all is good, we can screw in the motherboard with the skinnier of the 2 types of screws. Another little test for safe measure. Next, we get our cap and insert the light diffuser on. After that, we get our push button and put that in place as well. Now we can reseat the back housing onto the controller, making sure we don't pinch any of the ribbon cables. Make sure you work your way around the controller, squeezing both the top and bottom together to ensure all the clips get into place. Once that's done, we get our bottom plate and cover up the control board. Then you can do a quick test of all 3 buttons. In the final stretch here, we're going to screw in all the screws that we removed earlier and get the controller nice and tight. Once the screws are in place, we grab our L1 and R1 buttons, fit them back onto the controller, clip them in, and then we get our front plate, slide it in with the 2 pointy pieces in first, and then clip it into place, making sure all the clips are in place. If you did get the stick kit, now's the time to put those new sticks on. Just press fit them, they only go in one way, so it's very simple. Now that the controller is put back together, let's go ahead and map it. You'll first want to hold the pairing button on the bottom side for 3 seconds until the red light stays on. Once the red light's on, it means you're in pairing mode, and now you can finally map your buttons. To map your button, hold the paddle along with the button you want to map at the same time until the light flashes 3 times. Once that's done, the button is paired. You can then proceed to pair the other paddle as well. If you want to reset your mapping, you can go ahead and put your controller back into pairing mode and then hold circle, triangle, left and up on the D-pad along with L1, R1 all at the same time until the light blinks 3 times and it will reset your mapping. Our last order of business is to make sure the buttons work in-game.